In a kingdom fogged by sea winds and silence, where the sun never shone the same way twice, there lived a girl named She was not born to nobility, nor to any station that would grant her name a place in the annals of history. Her father was a clockmaker. Her mother, long since vanished, was rumored to have drifted into the forest and turned into smoke. Others whispered of pacts and payments. Seraphine moved into the Delamare estate, where mirrors outnumbered windows and halls seemed to twist when no one was watching, and beauty, to him, was a moment, not a motion. He braided her hair with threads of gold, pulling tighter each night. When she winced, he frowned. "You're trembling," he said. "You must be tired." A single mirror, too high to see into. No books, no quill, just the chaise, the gown laid over it, and a note, "Be still, my love. Beauty does not move." Then he ordered a chaise carved to fit her exact shape. She was measured, hips, spine, wrist, brow. Seamstresses wept as they stitched her gowns tighter and tighter. She stopped eating, she stopped laughing, she sat as he asked, always. As weeks became months, he began to note the tiny cruelties time bring, but the gates were locked, and the statues all turned to face her. Lucien found her curled beneath a dying rosebush, whispering a lullaby to herself. He said nothing, only lifted her in his arms and carried her back. That night, he sang to her. His voice was low, flat, a tune that never resolved. Said Seraphine was unwell. When envoys arrived, they saw her through glass, unmoving, and assumed she was ill. One sent a letter to the capital. She smiles, but she does not blink. The crease beside her lips when she smiled. The faint flush of heat after walking stairs. He began to worry. He commissioned portraits, dozens, all identical. She must not change. When the servants ran to check, they found Lucien in his study, carving something with a scalpel and bone. He waved them off. His hands were red. "A gift for her," he muttered. "She deserves to last." He forbade sunlight in her chambers. He replaced her handmaidens with dolls, becoming that she was happier this way. And Seraphine, who once sang to the moon, now sat quietly, watching it through glass. She was given gowns that trailed like mist and jewelry that shimmered without light, yet she rarely spoke. She sang only for Lucien, and only at night, and so Seraphine grew among ticking things. Brass gears, winding keys, and miniature ballerinas that danced in polished boxes. But it was her voice, not her hands, that turned heads. When she spoke, people stopped. When she sang, they forgot who they were. No one knew how or why, but it didn't matter. In a town where time was sold and music was taxed, Seraphine was priceless. Word of her voice reached the capital like a candle carried through fog. Soon enough, a carriage arrived. Black lacard pulled by 4 white horses, whose hooves made no sound. Inside was Lucien of House Delamare, the king's cousin, known more for his isolation than his charm. He was tall, pale, with eyes that looked silver in moonlight, and hands always gloved. When he first heard Seraphine sing, he did not clap, he did not speak. He only looked, then he smiled, and 3 days later, they were married. The town rejoiced, but quietly. Some called it a fairy tale. He adored her at first. He wrote poems to her eyebrows, sonnets to the way she blinked, but Lucien was not a man made for change. He brought her tea that smelled of tin and lilies. He said it would preserve her. One evening, she tried to run. Not far, just to the garden. The next morning, her bedroom had changed. No bed, only a velvet seat, shaped like a throne. Seraphine sat, and the days folded like paper cranes. Identical, weightless, and silent. One night, lightning struck the eastern tower. By winter, Seraphine no longer spoke, not even to herself. Her eyes stayed open even when she slept. Lucien said she was learning. When the king summoned Lucien to court, he refused. No reply came. The estate grew silent. No carriages, no laughter, only the sound of wind chimes made of teeth and glass. And Seraphine, sitting. The Delamare estate became a mausoleum of breathless wonder. Visitors, when permitted entry, often mistook the place for a museum of forgotten elegance. The halls bore paintings of Seraphine, not as she was, but as Lucien needed her to be. In each, her smile remained unbroken, lips half parted, as if always on the cusp of a song that never arrived. Here, Lucien kept his collection, not of books, but of pieces. His days were spent perfecting the lacquer of a mannequin sculpted with agonizing precision. The same tilt of chin, the same fall of hair, but no matter how flawless, it was never enough. He tore it apart. He began again. But every so often a stranger would come, drawn by legend or perhaps by longing, and ask to see the Lady of Stillness. Lucien allowed them in, one at a time, never more. Hair clippings, lace gloves stained with tears, finger bones etched with initials. He recited poems, gestures delicate as moth wings. The visitors wept. They always did. Something in her silence, in the curve of her cheek, or the sheen of her lashes, made them ache for things they never lost. Then Lucien would ask, quietly, "Do you envy her?" That beauty, once found, must not be allowed to vanish into entropy. His letters were ignored at first, then mocked, then banned. Relics of women who once resembled Serafini in feature or in tone. But for stillness, he took in girls who resembled Serafini in eye shape, in laughter, in the way they touched doorways when entering a room, not for what it contained, but for what it invited. The idea that love could become obsession, that admiration could freeze into cruelty, that one could, in trying to hold beauty, strangle it into forever. He taught them silence. He taught them to sit without shifting. He taught them to breathe like statues. They called him maestro. They called him father. No one knew where they came from. No one asked. His servants, now fewer in number, spoke only in whispers. Some said they saw shadows moving backwards. Others claimed they heard humming in their sleep. Her songs, fragmented and slow. She sat as seasons curled the curtains and the roof began to weep. She sat as Lucien whispered lullabies to the mannequin he never finished. The portraits lined every corridor, casting quiet judgment on those who dared to pass. Her presence was everywhere, yet she was nowhere at all. Her skin was pale as candlelight. Her lips held their curve without effort. She sat in the chaise each hour of each day, draped in gauze, like a shrine to silence. Some say Lucien fed her dew and petals. Others say he replaced her veins with wire. All that is known for certain is that she never blinked, and her shadow no longer moved. Lucien spoke to her constantly, not the way a husband speaks to a wife, but as a sculptor to a marble form. He read to her from books in dead languages. He told her of his dreams, which grew stranger by the week. Dreams of porcelain forests, of bones that whispered, of a time when no one aged and no one left. And always, he ended his tales with the same phrase, "We are eternal, my love, you and I." Untouched by decay, downstairs, in a locked room beneath the library, the true work unfolded. As the seasons passed, Lucien grew thinner, but his eyes shone brighter. He seldom ate. He rarely slept. Seraphine, meanwhile, ceased even to breathe visibly. The town outside forgot her. Children grew up not knowing her name. He led them to the room. He stood beside her. Some said yes, others fled, but none returned. By the 5th year, Lucien began writing letters to the Royal Academy, proposing a theory that true love was preservation. In response, he opened a school. Not for music, not for art. The town began to fear the estate, and Seraphine sat. She sat as dust coated her lashes. Then, one spring morning, a sound. The chaise creaked. Only once Lucien looked up. Seraphine had moved. At first, he believed it was the wind, the shifting of an old floorboard, a flicker in the mind from sleeplessness. But no, the chaise had moved, ever so slightly. A half-inch dragged, the sound of fabric pulling against itself. Lucien stared, his breath caught like a bird in a glass jar. Seraphine's hand was different. The fingers had unfurled by a fraction, just enough that the pinky no longer kissed her thigh. A human twitch, or a mechanical failure. His knees gave in. He sank before her like a disciple before a god, lips trembling. "My love," he whispered, his voice more dust than sound. "Is it you?" Seraphine did not speak. Her eyes remained fixed, but something had changed. Her pupils were wider. There was color in her cheeks, barely, like the flush of shame or the bloom of fever. Lucien reached out. His gloved hand hovered, then rested atop hers. It was warm. Lucien searched the halls, unhinged, convinced intruders had come, but there were no footprints, no broken locks, only dolls. Porcelain, jointed, slumped in corners where no one had left them. One had wept red from glass eyes, another had teeth. Lucien ordered them burned, yet each morning, new ones appeared. Not identical, but familiar. One had Seraphine's lips, not like a wound, but like a single, perfect tear, escaped and dried in blood. Lucien screamed. He clawed at the air. Former maids, grey with age, knocked on the gate in twilight, eyes hollow, mouths stitched with thread. They did not speak. They cleaned, they dusted the gallery, they polished the dolls, one by one, and they bowed to Seraph. He tore at his gloves until his own hands bled, desperate to rewind, to undo, to stop her from becoming real again. Birds dropped from air mid, trees bent away from the mansion, their branches like hands recoiling, and Seraphine stood. Lucien found her in the music room, where the pianoforte should have been ashes. It stood whole, gleaming. She sat at its bench, her hands on the keys, and she looked at him. But the curse, if curse it was, had begun to reverse. One, her hands, and one placed carefully at the foot of her chaise, had her eyes, but too many. Panic bloomed. Not relief, not joy, but terror. He stood guard by her side, scalpel in hand, watching for the moment her body would betray her soul. He feared she might speak. He feared more what she might say. On the 12th night, she did, and that inside, behind glass, a woman sat, perfect, eternal. Lucien staggered back. His mind, once so finely tuned, began to fracture. If she was warm, then she was living, and if she was living, she was changing. If she was changing, then she was escaping. He collapsed in the hall, gripping his face, mumbling. Mirrors once veiled were now uncovered, and in each reflection, Seraphine moved slightly differently. Her head turned a second faster. Her smile faltered for a blink. Sometimes, she was not in the mirror at all. For years he had worked to still time, to choke it into silence. Now the clock ticked again, and he could not bear its rhythm. That night, he ordered the windows bricked over. He boiled roses and wept into the petals. He sat beside her, combing her hair until strands came loose like thread from tapestry. He muttered spells he had read in forgotten alchemical texts, dipped her fingers in wax and lavender oil. Not the girl who had sung moonlight into people's bones, not sung aloud, but inside walls, behind tapestries, under floors, dissonant chords he did not recognize. It followed him, grew louder when he was near her. He locked the music room. He smashed the pianoforte. But it continued. This was something more brittle, more deliberate. Her head tilted now, as if listening, not to Lucien, but to something behind him. She blinked, once every hour, and sometimes, just barely, her lips moved in silence. But the next morning, her eyes followed the light. She was returning. What came back, however, was not the Seraphine he had known. Lucien began hearing music. Then, the dolls began to cry. It started with a single sound, a high, keening note that echoed through the marble gallery at dusk. Lucien stopped sleeping. Not with words. She bled. A thin line, drawn from the corner of her eye to her cheek. Servants returned to the estate. Not by choice, but as if summoned. Lucien, once lord of the house, now wandered its corridors like a ghost chasing its own footprints. Then came the storm. It arrived not as thunder, but as stillness. The world held its breath. The skies above the Delamare estate turned violet. No one saw it. Only the aftermark. The chaise empty. The air humming. Not with rage, not with sorrow, but with something far worse. Pity. She pressed one key. A single, low note. Lucien collapsed. His mind snapped. Not like a branch, but like silk. Soundless, graceful, final. They found him hours later, curled in a pool of ink and salt, whispering nonsense. I only wanted her to stay. He never spoke again. The town never learned the truth. They whispered only that the Delamare estate was cursed, that music floated from its windows during storms, that no birds flew overhead. But those who dared look too long always said the same thing. Her eyes were not empty. They were waiting. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a draft perhaps, or a settling of the floorboards beneath her. But the creak had been real. The room, so long sealed in hush, now held breath again. Lucien rose from his carving bench, scalpel still wet with lacquer. He approached slowly, almost reverently, as if nearing an altar that might burn him alive. Seraphine's head had tilted, by no more than a feather's breadth, but it was enough. He watched for hours. He did not blink, not once. When night fell and stars pushed their faces against the high glass panes, Lucien began to weep. He sang to her, old songs, broken and sour, notes stolen from the days when her voice had pulled color from the air. Her cheek now faced the window. Her lips, though parted the same as before, seemed to curve. "You're here," he whispered. The velvet curtains twisted inward, though no wind had entered. The fire in the hearth hissed and died, but the room grew warmer. The dolls in the hallways, those stiff, painted girls who never blinked, began to crack. One by one, their glass eyes slipped from their sockets and rolled across the floors like marbles. And Lucien, pale as ivory, wandered barefoot among them, oblivious. Lucien, without knowing, had stepped into the space between life and its reflection, a place shaped like love, but colder. They said the Lady of Stillness had begun to hum again, that she cried blood instead of tears, that at midnight one could hear her laughter echo down the hills. But no one came to see. Even the bravest hearts do not knock on the door of a mausoleum that breathes. "You never left me." Not smile, something far more ancient, like grief remembered too late. Lucien knelt before her, hands trembling, the terrible knowing that he had been watching not her resurrection, but her awakening. No reply, but her eyes glistened, subtly, unmistakably, as if behind them a storm had begun to churn. And as he sang, the air shifted. "You are mine," he shrieked. "I preserved you." But the house, like her, no longer answered to his voice. The mannequin in the corner, half finished, collapsed upon itself with a muffled crack. Mice scattered. In the days that followed, she moved again. Each note unraveled him. By dawn, his voice was gone. His fingers, bloodied and bare, traced her name in the dust again and again until it became meaningless. Subtly, her wrist fell a degree. Her eyelids fluttered once, like the final blink of a dying bird. And Lucien took each movement as revelation. He no longer ate. He no longer slept. His flesh sank in, his eyes bruised with joy. He told her stories of a future that shimmered like glass, where time had no claws, where beauty was eternal, and where every song she had ever sung would echo in vaulted halls long after the stars had drowned. But Serafini never spoke, and slowly the house forgot to hold itself together. Vines clawed through the stone. Mold grew over mirrors. Rats nested in the piano. In the town below, rumors bloomed like fungi in the dark. Then one night, a night with no moon, no wind, no sound, Lucien entered Seraphine's chamber and found her gone. The chaise was empty. The gown lay crumpled. Only her shoes remained, still laced, turned toward the door. Lucien stood there, shivering, not from cold, but from something deeper. He searched the house, every hall, every tower, every locked chamber. Nothing. He screamed. He raged. He tore paintings from the walls, clawed at the floorboards with bare hands. He returned to the chaise, sank into it, and began to rock slowly, humming the song she had sung on the night they first met. He died days later. They say it was hunger. They say it was heartbreak.